We got about 15 seconds before we kick the main meeting off. I'm going to start admitting. Let's see, am I streaming yet?
I think so.
We are streaming. Very good. Welcome, everybody, while we're getting rolling here. Recording is resuming now. And then, Waleed, I'm going to make you a co-host also, buddy, so you can allow in people from waiting room, if you would, please. Welcome, everybody. We are getting geared up here. Derek, I'm going to bring us up on Spotlight here for just 1 second while we get going. You're being added. All right. So, hey, baby brother, welcome to another Running Into the Fog. Looking good in your jean jacket there.
I like the way you got that lapel standing straight up. That looks very like Bon Jovi-ish.
It's kind of the 80s again that way, you know. So we've got quite a show today. We have 4 of our best friends from the competitive intelligence world, and 3 of those things is not like the other in the sense that 3 of them are CI fellows. So I'm going to be introducing them unless you'd like. Actually, Derek, would you introduce our CI fellows colleagues? We'll end with Cam, and then I'll jump into a little query with Cam, all right? Take in whatever order you want.
I would love to. Zena Applebaum, CI fellow, freshman class of 2015. I only know that because we went in together. Based up in Toronto. Elise Knuckles, I'm not sure what class you were in, but you're out in the greater Minneapolis area. And we have, last but not least, Phil Britton down in the Chicagoland territory. What class were you, Phil? Oh, I asked you that and then you were muted. Sorry.
Sorry, it was the class of 2020.
Okay. Elise, since I asked that question of Phil, what was your class?
I think the 2 years before that, I don't know, years meshed together. It was somewhere between 2020 and or 2015 and 2020, somewhere in there.
Okay. Oh, good. Well, it's a great pleasure to have you here.
I looked it up. So Zena was 2015 with you, Derek, and actually Zena toppled me as youngest fellow. She beat me by a year. So well done, Elise. Or excuse me, Zena. Elise came in 2018. Phil was 2020. I looked it up.
Awesome.
So awesome to have you 3 on here with us. We're going to be talking about ethics here in just a second, but before we do that, I want to welcome in the Executive Director of the Strategic and Competitive Intelligence Professionals, Cam Mackey. Hey, Cam, how are you, buddy?
Thanks, guys. Happy to be here. Got a good crowd. Thanks for the invitation.
Fantastic. I see private messages coming to me in a place where I can't read them. So thanks, everybody. Go ahead and post it to the public chat if you would, please. We're streaming on social right now all over the place. That's going to go on for about another 30 minutes. But if you are on social right now, you should definitely register at openrecon.com and join the Zoom meeting so that you can keep talking after the 30-minute break. The way you do that is visit openrecon.com and register for this session. If somebody would drop that into the chat for me, one of my team would be awesome. Cam, you've got a meeting coming up next month where these folks are going to be delivering some of the remarks but in a much more expanded workshop kind of fashion. Tell us about that. And I'm going to take the rest of us off Spotlight here so you can tell us about that front and center.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, well, we're excited about it. So this is obviously everyone has been, living through pretty crazy and trying times the last couple of years. So this will be the first in-person skip event in 3 years. And as we were talking with our board and members about, what do we want to focus on, we realized sometimes doing CI can feel a little bit lonely. Maybe we're not always part of the biggest department. Let's be honest, it could be a little hard to explain to friends and family what it is we exactly do. So we're really excited about bringing the community together again and getting creative, not just in some of the topics that we talk about, but how we talk about them. And so the segue to today's conversation, ethics, we're testing out a new format this year at Intellicon. We call it a learning lab. And basically what a learning lab is the TLDR, so too long didn't read version of a workshop. So if you give us 90 minutes, it's not going to be death by PowerPoint. You can have some fun, engaging conversations and information, some exercises, some hands-on roundtables, depending on the session. But the idea is you're not staring at a screen. At the end of it, you have some good ideas. You actually got to try out something and engage, so you're not going to forget it all by the time you go to the next session. And so for us at Skip, CI ethics is such a critical area, and it's not simply enough to say, well, you don't want to have something that you did show up in the newspaper. That's your benchmark. That's not enough. And so we're really excited when we got the proposal for this session from the team here today to talk about how CI ethics, the practice of ethical and primary intelligence and other aspects of CI, is changing and needs to change. So look forward to it, and that'll be one of our learning labs in IntelliCon next month in Elisa's hometown of the Twin Cities.
Now those might be fighting words, actually, if I know my fellow Wisconsinite. Adopted hometown, maybe?
Oh, okay.
Place where you used to go shopping for school clothes in August because there were no sales tax. That's how I think of the Twin Cities, anyway.
Or there were no cities anywhere near my rural area of Wisconsin. But yes, good eye. I am very much a cheesehead. Happen to live right on the border, but I will claim cheesehead, ownership any day over Minnesota.
Right on. Well, I can't wait to see what you guys have planned there. I am going to take us through a couple of opening remarks here, just to kind of set the stage a little bit, if I can figure out what happened to my controls. There we go. So we're going to be talking about ethics today. And there we go. The reason we wanted to do it today was because today is International Death to Tyrants Day. And the Ides of March, otherwise known as Sic Semper Tyrannis Day, and our erstwhile would-be tyrant Julius Caesar was assassinated on this date in 44 BC by some of his best friends. And so I thought that was just such a fitting, sort of metaphor for the whole ethics thing and getting this group of friends back together again. Hopefully nobody gets assassinated by the time we're done. But you can see here actually depicted on your screen, thus always unto tyrants. You see Caesar there in his golden robe and red, wrap. And Brutus is the one looking away, as if that he just can't bear to, see himself strike those killing blows against him. But one thing, we'll be talking about some of these things here as we kind of jump into things. But the whole notion of this meeting is really to kind of bring us together and take a look again at sort of where we come from and where we're going. You may have noticed the very sweet jean jackets that Derek and I are wearing. And for those of you who didn't bring your own jean jacket, this is a BYOJJ style meeting. So sorry, we don't supply the jean jackets. We just bring our own. But you're all invited here to ponder the assassination of Julius Caesar together with the Joe Bros on Running Into the Fog. And as we think about that, I found this cool coin. This is a denarius from 42 BC that Brutus himself minted in commemoration of the Ides of March. And Idibus Martis, the Ides of March under a cap of freedom between twin daggers, which I think is just really dark and just fun. So, as we sort of think about that and we ponder the setting that I think Shakespeare really laid out for us here. And there's some hyperlinks in there. If you want these slides, by the way, we'll post them to Twitter here in a little bit. But feel free to go ahead and take a look at sort of where this story comes from. Shakespeare had some literary flourish alongside this, but I'll be very interested to see sort of where this conversation goes with us. Now, bonus points if you can tell me who these three are in the next 10 seconds before I go ahead and spoil the surprise. Any guesses from our panel?
Larry, Moe, and Curly.
Larry, Moe, and Curly, great guesses, but it's actually the John Wilkes Booth, his dad, and his brother in November 25th of 1864, about 5 weeks before he assassinated Abraham Lincoln, famously shouting "Sic Semper Tyrannis." as he jumped down to the stage after pulling the trigger. But supposedly they were huge Shakespeare fans, as you might, not be too surprised to learn. And in fact, I was talking with Eric Garland the other day, and he's like, yeah, John Wilkes Booth was like Brad Pitt of his time. He was famous. So it's like as if Brad Pitt assassinated, Barack Obama or something. That's on the scale of magnitude of that particular event. But the history and major in me digresses. I want to have a little bit of a highlight here, and I got to figure out how to do it. I'm going to highlight my erstwhile friend, William. And I don't know if you guys see that highlighted on your screen or not. Hopefully you can. Yeah, that QR code, if you scan that QR code, you can redeem an NFT, a non-fungible token called a POAP, which is short for Proof of Attendance Protocol. One of the things that Aurora has been working on during the pandemic here is to create some digital artifacts that allow you to commemorate, I guess, and remember some of these events that you're participating in online. This is the very first POAP that we're making publicly redeemable, known as the Unthinkable token. That's what this first 30 minutes is called, is Unthinkable. At 30 minutes in, you're going to either have to join the Zoom meeting or go away, everybody on social. So again, welcome to the social stream. You're welcome to stay, but go register at Open Recon if you want to get onto this meeting in a more permanent way. For the second portion of this, which is when we take questions from the audience, it's called Unspeakable. And the only ground rules are it's a family show during the first half, and the second half you're allowed to cuss. So as you're thinking about this, these are the graphics of the NFTs that we're going to be making available. If you scan that QR code, you can go redeem the Unthinkable and Unspeakable tokens. And then for 9 of us, 6 of us are already accounted for, you'll get a contributor token. So there's 3 of you out there right now who are going to come up with some good remarks for our panel in the second half Unspeakable. And those 3 people will receive the 3 contributor tokens that we make available here. And you're going to want them, trust me. We've got some really good stuff coming as rewards for those of you who redeem these tokens. So with that, Phil, I'm going to hand it over to you and Derek and Elise and Zena and Cam. Jump in wherever you feel inspired. You've had plenty of me, and take us away for All About Ethics.
All right. I'll go ahead and kick us off, acting as the moderator for this panel. So want to talk a little bit about some of the topics we're going to cover. So these are just broad brush topics. We do not need to stick to them, but some of the questions are, how do the rules differ when it comes to ethical boundaries? Just because you're online, does that mean that you are anonymous and you can get away with things you shouldn't? When do you need to disclose? If you're operating in a country that may be more, shall we say, permissive, does that mean you can be permissive? Just because you found it online, does that mean it's good to go? Do the rules vary by industry, area of practice? And then what are some of those other guidelines? And then some of the things I believe, and this is something we're going to talk about, and Eric, the intro there with NFTs is a perfect example here, is the technology getting ahead of the rules? When it comes to things like facial recognition or unsecured Internet of Things devices, how do we navigate those waters if there hasn't been a test case yet? And then how does that qualify as just good signals intelligence or SIGINT, or is it hacking? And what's the difference between being really good at mining and hacking itself? So when you look at these 12 questions, we're going to tackle some of them here in a very light touch way. We're going to go very in depth, as Cam said in the intro, when we're together in Minneapolis for the Skip and Telecon. We're going to spend time covering these topics and so much more, and taking the questions, your actual questions that you have about your sticky situation. We'll talk about what's good, what's bad, and what's ugly. So with that, if we go to the next slide, you can see we've assembled a panel of individuals who have some experience in this area, and we've kind of assigned them roles, okay? And we just got to say, just because these people are in these roles doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to always be playing devil's advocate, etc. So I'm Phil Britton, I'm your moderator. We already introduced Zena and Elise and Derek, and each of them are playing a different role, a rule follower, a rule breaker, a consultant. Can I outsource my sticky situation to a consultant? And we each have sort of a different mindset when it comes to these. I think we'd all agree that there are hard and fast rules, but everything is sort of a shade of gray. And we're going to talk a little bit about that continuum right now. So moving to the next slide, you'll see that there is an ethical continuum. So, and there's a lot more than 50 shades of gray, I think, that you'll see here. When it comes to things that are legal, I mean, it's published information. It's items that you purchased above board, not in a back alley. It's researching things in the public domain. It's looking at things that companies themselves have published. Then in the middle, you start to get things where you're going to a trade show and you're talking to people in a booth. How much do you disclose? Hiring private investigators or consultants like myself or Derek, doing searches online, patent searches, looking for information. Again, it's available, it's out there. But what about talking to individuals? Whether it's people you hire to your company or hiring somebody to go and talk to the folks who wouldn't answer the phone if you were calling. Is this cool? And then you get further on into the area where, you know what, as Cam said, sometimes it's hard to explain what we do as competitive intelligence professionals. You have to explain this to your mom. Hey, here's something that I did. Oh, look, I'm starting to get into unethical behavior. I'm starting to get into areas that are perhaps technically legal. Like knowing which states in the US are a one-party state where I have to disclose that I'm recording a conversation and which states are not. That's a tricky ethical question when it comes to recording conversations. And in some places, it's outright unethical. Dumpster diving, probably unethical. Then we get to the electric fence issue of illegal activities. Things that there is no debate. Wiretapping, trespassing, theft, bribery, things like that. Just totally out of the park. But we're going to focus today on this area in the middle. All right, I'm not talking about buying a report from Gartner and using it internally. I'm talking about hiring Derek to make a phone call that I myself can't make. And where do those boundaries lie? So I believe that takes us through our prepared slides. One other thing I would like to discuss while we're here is that this ethics, and this is a shameless plug, ethics is the topic is always changing. People are always contributing to it. People are making contributions to this all the time. And since all of us here on this panel right now are members of the Council of Competitive Intelligence Fellows, I'm going to do a shameless plug and say the CI Fellows has just updated their ethics policy. So go to cifellows.com, click on the links, and there is a policy in there. And from what I understand, we're also going to be working on an FAQ site where you can submit your ethical questions. If you go to skip.org, there is an ethics policy posted there as well. In addition, there is also a list of FAQs there when it comes to some of these sticky situations. So just in the spirit of the CI Fellows and what we call, if you look in the chat, there's some discussion of ACME, and that means we act as ambassadors, we're champions for this sort of work, we act as mentors, and we act as educators. And I think the ethics topic hits all of the letters in ACME. So with that, let me give you a little background why we have these people in these roles. A couple years ago, I'm giving a talk at Skip, and I've got two parties sitting at a table next to each other. And I asked about, is it legal to go into and try to hack into your competitors' software, for instance? And this one group at a table, turns out they worked for a cybersecurity company, and they were like, "Oh, heck yeah, we can totally go in there and do that. We're, you know, this is what we do. This is how we operate." Sitting the next table over, there's a guy working for an aerospace company, and he was so straight and narrow. He would remove himself from a project if he saw something or learned something about a competitor's product through means that were not 100% above board. In his mind, he was working on a defense contract that could have a 30-year line of revenue behind it. The risk was too great, so he would recuse himself. Whereas the other group, the hackers, they called themselves Team Fast and Loose. And I found out later that Team Fast and Loose reported to Elise Knuckles. So, so that's why we have her role here. And then later, I bump into my pal Zena here, and it turns out she works for a law firm. And again, plays a little straight. With that in mind, the question I'm going to ask you guys, between the two of you, and Derek, jump in, obviously, is do the rules change by industry?
Well, I'll jump in and say I think they absolutely do. In different, especially if you're in an environment that is heavily regulated, and there are established processes that from years and years of people in your role prior have set these learned lessons. They apply those lessons to the future CI leaders in their organization. That makes sense to have some of those more refined rules, more structured rule set. But when you're in high tech, it's all new. There are CI programs popping up literally everywhere, and they're building out the program from the ground up where rules are a little squishy. It all really depends, in my opinion, on the legal, I guess the risk aversion or risk taking that the leadership wants to take on. So you establish that first. Where's your level of risk, and then you apply your CI, that squishy gray area of CI ethics in line with the risk posture of the company.
I think where competitive intelligence fits in wouldn't be any different than where the brand of the organization fits in. If you want to see yourself as being a laggard or an innovator, those two things carry with them certain things. And I think where you sit on an ethics continuum may apply to that as well. And so law firms are not exactly known for being, or the legal industry or the banking industry. These are, fintech, they're not known for being the innovators of the world, which is maybe why they're a little bit behind the technology world. That doesn't mean that the rules don't apply. And I would argue that the rules should still apply even in technology. It's just that maybe the individuals doing the CI, not necessarily you, Elise, have been brought up in a different way to think about their role in a different way than, say, a lawyer or a banker would think about what they're doing.
I will tell you, one of my experiences early on doing competitive intelligence, as many of you know, I worked for a large retailer based in Minneapolis. See, it all goes back to Minneapolis right now. And as such, to do my job, I walked into my competitor's place of business, which is highly unusual to be able to do that. I can't, in the example I like to use, if I worked for Boeing, I couldn't walk into an Airbus plant and go, hey, that thing over there, that's shiny. Tell me about that. So I was automatically in the gray area because I was on my competitor's property. So it is kind of interesting. And Derek, is there anything you have encountered dealing with myriad clients in your world?
Sure. And then you went to work for a retailer where you were somewhat out of place, right, Phil?
Yes, it was a little more difficult for me to blend into the background in a Sephora than it was in a Circuit City.
Correct. I love that part about your background, though. And Cam, when we got talking about submitting this panel for the IntelliCon coming up in, I guess, just 5 weeks or so, this foursome that we've put together for this panel, I think, can accurately represent all angles of the question, right? And as I see it, ethics this is not too dissimilar from how different industries use different intelligence tools and analytical methods and other things. You wouldn't find typically a 5 to 20 year time horizon scenario planning exercise being used in Elise's industry, but you might find it very popular inside of pharma and healthcare or aerospace and defense because your planning time horizon is just much longer. And I like to say that competitive intelligence is, it's been said that we occupy this space known as the ambiguous sciences. And at times, things are not black and white. And I can remember 2013, that slide that you showed depicted Joe Goldberg's, one of our esteemed fellows. And the ethical continuum that he used even back in 2013 is still relevant today. There's things that you'd be disappointed to tell your mom. And then there's things that get you zapped by the electric fence. And then there's things that might be just left of that. And you have to figure out culturally, there's where I land on this topic. You have to figure out culturally not only personally where you fit, but professionally what you're going to tolerate. And where, if there's plenty of examples where I think there's been mismatch between personal, what you're willing to tolerate, and professional, culturally, organizationally, what's being willing to tolerate. So I love your comment just now, Elise, on that, and I'll toss it back to you. Your mom doesn't know what you do, even to this day.
Right. So like the whole mom spectrum, I honestly, I could tell her all day long, all the things I did, that would be ethically gray area, and she'd still have no clue. So I do have that advantage.
It's funny, when you talked about that, one of the things that occurred to me is Elise in the technology field is used to like buying her competitor software or getting it, however you get it, and taking it apart and reverse engineering it. In the law firm context, we create documents that we openly share back and forth and mark up and essentially take apart the other person's argument or the other person's product right on the spot. And so we're learning about our competitor by way of working with our competitor. So it's a very different place where you would put the gray lines, because once you're already in that space together, it's like, now what do you do? How do you make sure that you don't go any farther than what's in front of you? And I think that's where maybe the industries are a little bit different, just in the way we're used to working together by virtue of the work that we're actually doing.
We encounter those too. We do have competitors. We call them frenemies or co-opetition, where we have to play nice, but we also hate each other secretly. Well, actually, no, actively hate each other, but we have to play nice. And so we do have to have those, we do put barriers in place so that someone like me can't just sit on a call with a core partner and collect all the intel. But that gets super fuzzy because there's everyone, when you build a community approach to CI where everyone is a competitive intelligence practitioner in your company, who then can have that conversation if everyone's, actively trying to collect. So it becomes very awkward because and I'm super competitive. I want to win at all costs, not all costs, but at most costs. And so I'm going to try to find ways to collect that intel, and it's tough. And in your environment, Zena, it's got to be incredibly difficult because you're always working with folks that you compete with. So where do you draw the line, and how do you still do your job and be effective and help your company, but
where do your personal and professional ethics align or derail, right? So when I think about I'm always competitive, and Phil's example of he would walk into a Circuit City or a Radio Shack back in the day. If you needed to go there as a person to buy something, do you leave your mystery shopping at home when you do that? Or are you constantly thinking how is my competitor doing in this space versus how my customer service team would do or whatever? And I don't know the answer, but I feel like at some point the personal and the professional have to turn on and off. And maybe that's where the ethics align as well.
Well, the funny thing about that, Zena, is there's a time where I was in a Walmart store and I noticed they were getting the remodel, and I was trying to figure out what their revenue increase was going to be. And I was with my wife and I was talking to somebody in the store, and she's like, "You never turn it off, do you?" And I was like, "What? I'm here. There's an opening. I'm going to ask some questions. Why wouldn't you?" So yeah, sometimes that does blend in an interesting way. And I want to go back real quick to something you had just said, Elise. You said when everyone in your company is a collector. Mm. But everybody in your company is not a CI professional.
Right.
So what do you do when a well-meaning individual perhaps provides something to you that you shouldn't have?
Yes, this gets very awkward, but it's the only way we can really effectively do our jobs. So we have to have everyone be a collector. So we've kind of taken that risk saying, yep, we now understand people are going to give us stuff they shouldn't have. So we do have an ethics policy that we've written in conjunction with our legal team to give general policies to say, don't do dumb things, really high level, not the detailed stuff that the CI team has to follow, but more high level stuff. And then we also have a Google group or distribution group that people can go, if they have a question, like, I got this great juicy bit of intel, they can send it to a specific distribution group that is legal and CI where we can evaluate it. And the rule in general is if you have some piece of information, share it with the team first, the CI team, the practitioners, the people who are trained in this, before you post it on Slack or Salesforce or God forbid, LinkedIn or something like that, so that we can scrub it and make sure it's accurate. That's one way we've tried to protect ourselves. But you're right, it does open up kind of Pandora's box when you get everyone very actively interested in collecting.
I asked this question we go back, a couple of years. We did a panel not dissimilar than this one for SLA, right? And in that, I remember us talking about where does the onus of care reside? Who has the onus of care or due diligence of care to not talk to an outsider or not post it to LinkedIn? And I think that I'm of the opinion that resides with the person and the organization which they represent. And if you don't dispute that position, then competitive intelligence can get quite interesting. And you can get very creative, right? With advanced secondary techniques all the way up to and including human intelligence. So that's my stance on it. Obviously, there's an ethics boundary that you don't cross, but that can be a little bit different. And I find that our clients, depending on the industry and the vertical in which they operate in, that boundary can move a little bit left or right, depending upon exactly what that organizational stance is on that.
Yeah, I have this. We have a client just recently who told us from their risk tolerance standpoint, even though they were using us as a competitive intelligence firm, they didn't want us speaking directly to any current or former employees of the target companies. They wanted us to talk to suppliers and people one step removed because that was their corporate risk tolerance and posture. And then we have other companies who were like, oh yeah, can't you, here, I'll give you a list of, here's 10 people I want you to call. Here's their phone numbers. They all used to work for us. Go ahead and reach out to these guys first. And it depends on the company and that risk posture. But something you just said, Derek, I'm talking about where does the onus of care reside? Something I had done when I worked for Best Buy, we had an organization of 100,000 employees. And retail is pretty incestuous, shall we say. A lot of people hopping across the street and changing their shirt and going from one company to another professionally. So there's a lot of competitive knowledge just locked up in one's head. So we actually put in the employee handbook, here's a brief synopsis of competitive intelligence ethics, what's good, what's bad, what's ugly. Also, here's some counterintelligence stuff. Here's when you don't answer the phone, you don't, and if somebody calls and tells you they're the founder's cousin and they want to know how many products we have on the shelf, just don't answer the question. But it was brief and it directed people to the competitive intelligence team, and we had an ethics department, straight to the ethics department with whatever questions you might have.
Hey, Phil, can I jump in for a second?
Absolutely.
So just, so it's Skip. So, we're a nonprofit. It's a little bit of a different wrinkle than the organizations represented here. And so, our business is not giving, ethical advice. There are great law firms that do that. But, we get calls from members saying, what do I do? The first thing really is you got to talk to your internal business partners, because CI is not the department that decides what the risk tolerance is for the organization. And if you're, for example, in sales, you report up to your sales or marketing, guess what? The VP of sales does not make that decision either. And the more you work with organizations, I'm sure, like Phil and Derek and Eric can attest to, organizations have tension between legal and sales. They should. That's actually natural, right? Sales just wants to sell their face off and bring in billions of dollars at all costs. And, legal is really a little more cautious. Those are good tensions. So CI needs to be part of that workflow, part of that discussion. So all the decisions we make and that we're talking about are intentional. The worst thing is when, CI is making decisions without the support, without the awareness of the business partner, where field sales is too. That's when organizations get into trouble.
Oh, absolutely. And again, this is where you can turn to for guidelines. If you don't have them, you can turn to Skip and say, hey, I need to start my policy, if the company doesn't have one, with the guidelines published by Skip or the Competitive Intelligence Fellows, or any number of publications that have been written by members of those two organizations over the years. It's a great place to start, but at the end of the day, kind of like a suit, off the rack might not work for you. You may need to get a little tailoring done to fit your needs.
Well, and then that's for those who are doing that, having to write policies, join the session at Skip in April, and you'll get a lot of rundown of all the options from fast and loose to team conservative. And I'll help you figure out where you fall in that spectrum.
Guys, this is awesome. Just absolutely unthinkable insights from this fantastic panel. And I'm so sorry to say goodbye to the social live stream folks who joined us on the social networks, but visit Open Recon, register, join the Zoom meeting, and you can keep talking now during the unspeakable portion of our meeting. We've got a first question in from our audience. I'm going to eject the social